What if I told you? Most people who cheat don't actually want to. Not at first. Not even when it begins. Because cheating is rarely about love. It's not always about sex either. And it's definitely not as simple as they're just a bad person. In fact, the real reason people cheat is far more uncomfortable than that. It's psychological. It's emotional. And sometimes it starts long before another person even enters the picture. So if you've ever been cheated on, or you're afraid it might happen to you, what you're about to hear might completely change how you see relationships. We've all heard the same explanation before. They cheated because they didn't love you. They cheated because they're selfish. They cheated because they're toxic. And while those explanations feel satisfying, they're also dangerously incomplete. Because if cheating were that simple, it would be easy to predict, easy to prevent. But it's not. Some people cheat in happy relationships. Some cheat even when they're deeply in love. And some people don't even understand why they did it until everything is already destroyed. So what's really going on? To understand cheating, you have to stop looking at the act and start looking at the mind behind it. Here's the first truth most people don't want to hear. Cheating is often not about the person they cheated with. It's about what that person represents. Attention, validation, escape, power, relief. Sometimes the other person is just a mirror, reflecting something the cheater feels they've lost. Think about it. When someone cheats, they're not just choosing another person. They're choosing a feeling. The feeling of being wanted again. The feeling of being seen. The feeling of being exciting instead of predictable. And that feeling can become addictive. Not because the new person is better, but because the experience feels different. That's why many people who cheat don't even leave their partner. Because what they're chasing isn't a new relationship. It's a temporary version of themselves. They miss being. There's something psychologists call an identity gap. It's the space between who you are and who you feel you used to be, or who you wish you were. And this gap becomes dangerous in long-term relationships. Because over time, life changes you. Responsibilities increase. Stress builds. Routine takes over. And slowly, you stop feeling like the person you once were. You're no longer the exciting version of yourself, the spontaneous one, the confident one. Now you're just tired, predictable, routine. And then suddenly, someone new comes along. They laugh at your jokes. They notice things your partner stopped noticing. They make you feel alive again. And in that moment, it's not really about betraying your partner. It's about reconnecting with a version of yourself you thought you lost. That's the trap, because it feels like rediscovery, when in reality, it's avoidance. Not all cheating starts with bad intentions. In fact, many people who cheat never plan to. It begins subtly. A conversation that goes a little deeper than usual. A message that feels slightly more personal. A moment of vulnerability shared with the wrong person. And then, boundaries blur. This is where emotional neglect plays a role. Not always intentional neglect, but perceived neglect. Because in relationships, it's not just about what's happening. It's about how it feels. You can be physically present and still feel emotionally invisible. And when someone else provides that missing emotional connection, it creates a powerful bond. Stronger than logic. Stronger than commitment. Sometimes even stronger than love. And that's when people start justifying things. It's just talking. It's harmless. It doesn't mean anything. Until suddenly, it means everything. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Opportunity plays a bigger role than most people admit. Because not everyone who cheats is constantly looking to cheat. But put the right person, in the right emotional state, in the right environment, and the line becomes easier to cross. This is why cheating often happens during travel, work environments, late-night conversations, moments of stress or vulnerability. It's not always premeditated. Sometimes, it's situational. And once the line is crossed once, it becomes easier to cross again. Because the biggest barrier was never the act itself. It was the first decision. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Cheating doesn't just happen emotionally. It happens chemically. When someone new enters your life, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical linked to excitement, reward, and addiction. That's why new connections feel intense. Everything feels amplified. Conversations feel deeper. Attraction feels stronger. But it's not necessarily real. It's neurological. Your brain is responding to novelty. And novelty is powerful. Because long-term relationships naturally lose that chemical intensity over time. Not because something is wrong, but because stability replaces excitement. And for some people, that stability starts to feel like boredom. So when they encounter something new, their brain lights up again, and they mistake that chemical reaction for something meaningful. Now here's the part most people never talk about. Some people cheat because they don't believe they deserve the relationship they have. It sounds irrational, but it happens more often than you think. If someone struggles with low self-worth, they may feel uncomfortable in a healthy relationship because deep down, they're waiting for it to fall apart. So instead of waiting, they become the reason it does. It's a form of control. If I ruin it, at least I wasn't blindsided. If I destroy it, I don't have to fear losing it. This is self-sabotage, and it's one of the most painful reasons behind cheating. Because the person isn't just hurting their partner, they're confirming their own worst belief about themselves. You've probably heard this before. It just happened. But the truth is, it never just happens. Cheating is rarely a single decision. It's a series of small ones. Replying to that message, keeping that conversation going, hiding it, crossing emotional boundaries, ignoring guilt. Each step feels small on its own, but together, they lead somewhere inevitable. And by the time the final line is crossed, it feels like it happened suddenly, even though it didn't. Here's another question people struggle with. If someone cheats, why don't they just leave? Because cheating and leaving are driven by different motivations. Cheating is often about escape. Leaving is about change. And change is harder. Leaving means starting over, facing consequences, losing stability, admitting failure. So instead, some people try to keep both. The comfort of their relationship and the excitement of something new. Not because it's logical, but because emotionally, they're trying to fill two different needs. After cheating happens, reality hits. And it hits hard, because the fantasy doesn't survive exposure. The excitement fades. The guilt grows. The consequences become real. And suddenly, the thing that felt so powerful starts to feel empty. That's when many people realize it was never worth it. But by then, the damage is already done. Trust is broken. Perception is changed. And the relationship is no longer the same. So when you strip everything away, cheating is rarely about one thing. It's a combination of unmet emotional needs, identity struggles, opportunity, chemical reactions, avoidance, and sometimes deep personal insecurity. It's messy, complicated, and uncomfortable to admit because it forces us to accept something difficult. That people are not always as simple as good or bad, and neither are their actions. This doesn't excuse cheating, not even close, but it explains it. And understanding something is the first step to protecting yourself from it. Because when you understand the psychology, you stop looking for obvious signs and start noticing the subtle ones. The emotional distance, the identity shifts, the small boundaries being crossed. Because cheating doesn't start in the bedroom, it starts in the mind. Most people think cheating comes out of nowhere, but in reality, there are almost always signs. Not obvious ones, not the kind you see in movies. Subtle ones, a shift in attention, a change in energy, a quiet emotional withdrawal. Because before someone disconnects physically, they disconnect emotionally first. You might notice they're less present, less interested in conversations, less engaged in the relationship. Not necessarily cold, just different. And that difference is easy to ignore because it doesn't feel urgent. It doesn't feel like a threat, but it is. Another sign? They start protecting their space more. More privacy with their phone. More defensiveness over simple questions. More distance disguised as needing time. And here's the dangerous part. When people notice these signs, they often explain them away. They're just stressed. They're going through something. It's probably nothing. And sometimes it is. But sometimes, it's the beginning of something much bigger. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. Not everyone who cheats is a bad person. And that's what makes it so confusing. Because we expect bad actions to come from bad people. But human behavior doesn't work like that. People can be loyal and still make disloyal choices. Kind and still cause deep pain. Loving and still betray someone they care about. Because in certain moments, emotion overrides identity. And when emotions take control, people justify things they would normally reject. They create narratives like, "This is different. No one will get hurt. I deserve this." Not because they're evil, but because the mind is incredibly good at protecting itself from guilt. It bends reality, just enough. to make the wrong decision feel acceptable. Comparison is one of the most underrated triggers of cheating. Not comparison between people, but comparison between experiences. This used to feel better. This used to be exciting. This used to be different. And over time, people start measuring their current relationship against a past version of it. Or worse, against a fantasy. And that's where things start to break. Because no real relationship can compete with imagination, especially when imagination is fueled by something new. So instead of appreciating what they have, they start focusing on what's missing. And once the mind starts focusing on absence, it becomes easier to justify seeking something else. Secrecy doesn't just hide cheating, it intensifies it. Because when something is hidden, it becomes more exciting, more emotional, more consuming. It creates a private world, separate from reality. And inside that world, everything feels stronger. The conversations feel deeper. The connection feels more meaningful. The attraction feels more intense. But that intensity is misleading because it's not built on reality. It's built on isolation. There are no responsibilities there, no real-life pressures, no consequences, at least not immediately, just emotion. And emotion, without reality, can feel like something it's not. Here's something most people don't think about. Not everyone who cheats gets caught. Some people carry it for years, and on the surface, everything looks normal. But internally, something changes. Because even if the relationship continues, the dynamic shifts. There's guilt, there's distance, there's a quiet awareness that something is broken. And sometimes, the person who cheated becomes more attentive, more loving, more careful, not because things are better, but because they're compensating, trying to balance something that can't really be balanced. This is where people get conflicted, because understanding cheating can feel like defending it, but it's not the same thing. You can understand why something happens without agreeing with it, without accepting it. Understanding gives you clarity, and clarity gives you power. Power to recognize patterns, protect yourself, make better decisions. Because when you only see cheating as they're just a bad person, you miss the deeper signals. And those signals are what actually matter. So how do you protect yourself from something this complex? Not by controlling your partner, not by checking their phone, not by constant suspicion. Because control doesn't prevent cheating. It just changes how it happens. Real protection comes from awareness. Pay attention to emotional shifts. Not just what they say, but how they feel. Notice when connection starts fading, when conversations become shallow, when effort becomes inconsistent. And most importantly, pay attention to yourself. Because people often ignore their instincts. They feel something is off, but they stay quiet. They avoid confrontation. They hope things will fix themselves. But silence creates space for problems to grow. Healthy relationships require uncomfortable conversations, not accusations, not attacks, but honesty. Because the earlier you address something, the easier it is to understand it. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You can do everything right and still get cheated on. You can love deeply, communicate clearly, show up consistently, and it still might not be enough. Because cheating is not always about what you did wrong. Sometimes, it has nothing to do with you at all. And that's painful, but it's also freeing. Because it means you don't have to carry blame. That doesn't belong to you. So what does all of this really mean? It means cheating is not simple. It's not just betrayal. It's not just desire. It's not just opportunity. It's psychology. It's emotion. It's identity. It's human complexity at its most uncomfortable. And the more you understand it, the less you fall for surface-level explanations. The less you ignore subtle warning signs. The less you blame yourself for things you didn't cause. Because in the end, cheating doesn't start with another person. It starts with a shift inside someone's mind. So the next time you hear someone say, they cheated because they didn't love you, remember this. People don't always lose love before they lose themselves. And sometimes, that's where everything begins. Before you go, I want you to answer this honestly. Do you think cheating is a choice or something people slowly fall into? Because the answer says a lot about how you see relationships. Drop your answer in the comments. Choice or slow drift. And if this video made you see things differently, make sure you like and subscribe. Because most people only talk about what's obvious. Here, we break down what people avoid.